Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Making Sense of the World with me. Last time I did a video about the Rapport's handling of Dr. Kapp and the Ernst Roets debate. This time we're going to be doing an interview with Dr. Tristan Kapp. So stay tuned and join us.
No, don't speak of the devil. He wants you to. He wants you to. No, don't speak of the devil, and you do too. And you do too.
Before I start with the actual video, I just wanted to point out a few things. One, I'm still not completely over the flu, and when I did this interview with Dr. Kapp, I was also just starting the flu. That said, the other issue I picked up while I was doing the editing that I wasn't aware of during the actual recording of this interview was the fact that my laptop decided not to use its microphone properly. So I had to boost my own dialogue a little bit louder so that it would be audible, but there's still a few discrepancies in my audio. However, you're not going to be watching this video just to listen to me waffle. You're going to be listening to Dr. Kapp, which is the point of the whole interview. But I'll make up for it by putting some subtitles in my section when necessary to clarify. And with that said, let's jump straight in. Dr. Tristan Kapp, you're currently connected to the University of Pretoria through studies. You recently got your doctorate in religious studies. According to a letter that appeared in the report, you have still got to do your graduation, but that doesn't disqualify you from using your title, does it?
No, because I passed my PhD without needing to defend it.
Which is actually brilliant. I mean, we could all hope for something like that. I'm actually quite jealous because I'm quite nervous about that whole thought. Could you give us some background on what happened with Ernst Roets?
So what started off with this whole debacle was that there was this thing going on where Ernst Roets believed or espoused that universities were teaching a divisive racist theory targeted against white people. Yeah, the Agenian critical race theory, which it's not a critical race theory. It's just labeled as such by right-wing populists because it's, connected to the critical race theory, and they just throw it into a whole basin of, disqualifying it as, oh no, just another woke discussion. But that was after the scandal, I believe, with Nota Baloyi, who argued also wrongfully that based on, I think it's Darwinism or something, that white people are or don't have a certain gene or something. I can't remember, which I don't know why anyone would care what a rapper has to say about evolutionary biology. Yeah. But essentially, Ernst Roets ran with that and decided to peddle this entire idea that, there is this deeply divisive Azanian race theory being taught at universities that are targeted against white people, forcing a very victimist narrative. And so I thought, this can't be true. And I went and researched it, and I actually found a lot of valid criticisms in the original Azanian theory, criticizing certain colonial institutions that are still persistent in universities, criticizing the constitution and certain, stuff in South Africa that is not really doing its utmost in eradicating remnants of colonialism and whiteness in institutions in South Africa. And I found that to be fair, not targeted against white people, but as a valid sort of radical African philosophy. And given my background in studying African philosophies, it came as no surprise to me in understanding where it came from in sort of the radicalization thereof. So what I essentially tried to do is, okay, I decided to go and read all about that. And basically posted on Facebook for all of my friends, which I believe you probably saw, about the Azanian theory, and basically just highlighting what it is and what it isn't, for in case people might, believe what individuals such as Roots has to say about it. But nonetheless, that ended up being cited in media. It first appeared by accident. I discovered it by accident on Independent Online, where they cited me, as well as I think was where I was quoted quite coincidentally. And then right after that, another former lecturer of University of Pretoria, Dr. Willem Graaf, a lecturer in procedural law. He was affiliated by law, and now he's full-time with academia, or academia, the private Afrikaans university. Which basically told me all I needed to know. He posted an opinion piece on Politics Web, which I heard down the grapevine that it is supposedly run by AfriForum. I don't know how true it is, but nonetheless, essentially, I read his response there, where he accused me of glossing over a deeply divisive racial theory, calling for the violence against white people, and that the Ubuntu philosophy, according to the Azanian concept, espouses that, white people can be killed by black people, and it's, nobody lifts an eyebrow, which I found exceptionally anti-intellectualist and a part of a global trend that is trying to discredit universities and academia for its diversity and equity and inclusive policies. And that was where it basically snowballed. And so I wrote a piece which I intended to send to Politics Web, which they did not publish, as per usual. And so I've just published it on my blog as a separate article, citing a few academic sources, as a formal article, rather. And that was where it stopped. And then out of the blue, I received a phone call from Rapport, who told me that they want to interview me as an academic, or they came with a quip that they're asking a bunch of academics their perspectives affiliated with universities on this phenomenon, and they wanted to know what my perspective is. And while I informed,
they specifically looked for you.
well, I don't know. I couldn't say, but they contacted me, and I decided, well, let me hear this out. And the first thing he asked me was, "Am I a Satanist?" And I remember being caught off guard by the question, due to the fact that what does it have to do with anything? I thought you were trying to interview me as part of an academic, conversation on what Azanian theory is and what it isn't, and based on my vehement criticism of Ernst Roets' anti-intellectualism.
Can I just interrupt you for a sec? So where exactly did your criticism of Ernst Roets turn up before this report article? Was it just in the Independent Online?
It was in Independent Online, as well as African Insider, and then on and not my criticism, but then Gravit wrote an article on Politics Web criticizing me. To which I responded to both Gravit and Roots in a formalized sort of article, criticizing them and pointing out a phenomenon amongst white right-wingers known as white fragility, something that scholars like Dr. Nikki Falco, for example, mentioned as part of a loss of identity post-apartheid in Afrikaners, in creating moral panics. So yeah, that was essentially the long and short of that.
Sure. Just to come back to the the origin of the story about this critical race theory, the Azanian critical race theory. The person that was accused of making these remarks, was he in any way affiliated to a university?
So you mean the No, he wasn't. No, he
So he
wasn't.
wasn't.
Not at all.
So
Although,
how did Roots get to this whole thing of now it's taught in universities?
so the theory or the philosophy was developed by Professor Joel Mudiri, in addition to a few other legal scholars affiliated with the University of Pretoria. Um, and, obviously it's, the Constitution provides freedom of academia. There's no direct indication of incitement to violence. But of course, Willem Gravett and Ernst Roets deeply reduces these theories to an attack on white people purely because of the fact that I believe that it criticizes the very portals of power of whiteness that are in South African society, as seen with certain concepts like white privilege and wealth distribution and issues. So essentially, that was where the connection was made.
A lot was said about your connection to University of Pretoria. That they made it seem as if you're working for the university and you full-time employed there and all that. Could you maybe just give some background on what your role is at the university?
So I don't know where they got that from. I am not employed by the university. Rather, I'm just a research associate, which basically gives me the opportunity to do research underneath the university's name. So that's basically the long and short of it. I'm not giving classes. I'm not tutoring, aside from extracurricular activities that some students at the University of Pretoria or not might reach out to me and ask me for guidance or advice or something. But aside from informal friendships and research, I do not have a formal employed status at the university. But aside from being a PhD candidate, which automatically associates me with the university.
So basically, it was just a case of convenience to nail you to the university and then, cause trouble for you.
Yes, well, I suppose that, as well as the fact that Ernst Roets remarked on his Facebook that I study at, or that I teach at the university, which was not true at all. And the article itself didn't reflect that. The article called me a navorsingsmedewerker. But of course, the title in and of itself on the Rapport newspaper misrepresented me in such a way. People thought I am a lecturer because of the fact that they don't know the difference between a research associate or someone that does research affiliated with the faculty, but does not get paid by the university. So it's basically an unemployed sort of association purely by research.
So it was basically like, by extension, they were playing the player instead of playing the ball. It was just
Yes, exactly.
drama as possible.
Precisely. The very tabloid-esque sort of approach in creating a huge scandal in order to sell newspapers.
I think you must have received a lot of hate for this.
Yes, Christina, I have received hate in my life because of my outspokenness on social media and my idea that academia enshrines the whole concept of speaking truth to power. But the hate, defamation, and harassment I received after this Rapport scandal is incalculable. My family have been affected by it. My friends, individuals associated with me, even my former supervisor was harassed by a particular Christian fanatic who, incessantly wanted to proclaim the fact that I am misguided. And then as soon as some Dutch Reformed ministers stood up for me, he wanted to further, piggyback this whole on this whole sensationalist narrative and, lure me out for public confrontation. So it was hectic. I even saw comments from family members who believed that they knew me personally and that I am just an attention seeker and all of that. Whereas I didn't ask for this. It's not like I went out of my way trying to, place the spotlight on myself. I was doing what I always do, criticizing things that are damaging and trying to, in good faith, protect the university's name from, individuals outside the university trying to drag it through the mud. And that was the because individuals didn't read the article behind it and only focused on the poster, which was a disaster in and of itself, because they deliberately went for pictures on my social media. And I didn't even remember those images until I saw it on Rapport's page. So those pictures were long forgotten, and it was, during a time where I was being edgy and funny with friends, trying to take photos in a, cemetery, because why not? It was all
just like that on our profiles. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
I dressed up for Halloween, and I've got pictures of myself dressed up like a witch with a broom and a hat and everything. Imagine
exactly
for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose because of my inference and my previous brand, the Friendly Satanist, people made that association of the satanic panic-esque demonization of me as some evil Satanist, trying to warp the minds of poor theology students, which was extremely problematic in the first place. But as I said, my religious affiliation had nothing to do with the entire debacle to begin with. And nowhere in any correspondence I had on the matter was my religious affiliation involved. Even you could argue that if it was a, sort of post hoc fallacy, correlation equals causation, something, you would expect that the other media would cite me simultaneously the same way. Yet Independent Online, as I said, and what do you call it? African Insider both, referred to me as a human rights activist and an academic and researcher, which, in matters involving research is much more relevant than, my own religious affiliation. But interestingly enough, the journalist in question from Rapport actually gaslit me when I told him, listen, bro, I told you that my religious affiliation was not relevant to the entire situation. And he told me on WhatsApp, you can't decide when your religious affiliation is relevant or not. That's not for you to decide, or convenient when it's convenient for you. I'm like, what? So
that's they deliberately set out to portray you in a bad light.
Precisely. And additionally, he told me that a member of the faculty, supplied that photograph of me to him to place
me.
Exactly. I mean, and I also remember telling him, I really don't think that individuals in academic positions have the time nor the care to go and research for my odd Facebook posts and pictures on Instagram, which I found highly disingenuous to begin with. But I suppose everybody just doubled down and closed ranks to protect the Christian Calvinist elite as such.
Jeez. So just another question: out of all the hate that you got for this online, how much of it would you say was an attempt to argue or present a coherent argument, and how much of it was just plain hate, irrational anger?
I wouldn't say that any of it was essentially well thought through, because out of all the comments I scoured, I really didn't see anything that was remotely worth entertaining reasonably. Instead, it was just references to my gender identity, sort of transphobic quips. It's okay. Calling me a she, accusing me of wearing a skirt, which was a goth kilt that I bought in Cape Town way back in the day. So basically just defamation. And it's not as if Rapport, switched off the comments to, seeing that it was getting out of hand. No, they absolutely rode this entire horse until it was absolutely dead and dying in the gutter. So the most hateful and absolute. I don't think there are the absolute malice embodied by a lot of these comments, but none of them were reasonable. All of them were just reactionary religiophobia, essentially.
It's really sad that we still get that here in South Africa. I mean, with the constitution and freedom of religion and all that sort of thing, it still hasn't penetrated somehow.
Fortunately, that is true, but I think that is because of the fact that, and this is why I believe that Ernst Roets is essentially a good example of this, and it's essentially the protection of, the privileged. I mean, you remember, I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, I think it was 2-3 years back, there was a dominee in Sandrift, Northwest, that was found guilty of 14-year-old kids. 2 14-year-old boys. His wife was a school headmistress at the local school where the 2 kids were affected. But instead of, I'd say, standing for justice, the entire community rallied around them and protected them to a certain degree, believing their innocence. And there's been numerous amounts of those scandals in recent times, including, the Timothy Omotosho, who appeared in court for, I think it was 26 or 33 sexual abuse cases against them or counts against him. So, it's this idea of that Christianity enjoys a privileged status in South Africa. And I think Professor Skarnik Oudemans also wrote that in her article on commenting on Electus per Deus, where she said that even with Electus per Deus, who literally is translated as a Christian cult, chosen by God, was a Christian cult, not a satanic cult, but instead portrayed by the media as the sort of devilish cult that worshipped the devil and committed these murders under the guise of Satan, or under the calling of Satan. And as such, the failure for the media to even remotely acknowledge that these murders were committed by individuals who classified themselves as Christian is indignant of the fact that Christianity in South Africa enjoys a privileged status. Therefore, the Constitution, albeit exceptionally progressive and one of the best constitutional frameworks in terms of human rights in the world, the issue surrounding it is just that it's a relic. Aside from it being a relic, there's no enforcement. If you're not remotely famous or infamous rather, and have a public backing that basically criticizes you towards the Human Rights Commission of South Africa, such as what happened with Greta Wit and Steve Hofmeyr, you can't expect the Human Rights Commissions and institutions such as the CRL Rights Commission to do anything about human rights violations based on infringements of human rights in the name of religion, which is to a certain degree what is most disheartening to me based on this whole issue. So yeah, as I said, I believe that these things are happening in South Africa because of the fact that people believe themselves, a lot of religious people, a very specific amount of religious people believe themselves to be exempt from the law. And, as such, seeing how even individuals in academia react to this whole, situation was even surprising. Thinking that, people who would, what do you call it? Individuals who would restrict their opinions to facts, reacted very reactionistically to this whole situation. And it was very, disheartening to see individuals turn their back on me, especially individuals whom I've shown exceptional loyalty to, shared ideas with, broke bread with, essentially, and even engaged with in complementary ways, you know. So essentially, it just reminded me of how important public scholarship is outside of the ivory towers of academia, and informing individuals, and even having academics, you know, get out of you know, lecture halls and on social media to educate the public, because it is because of the fact that that academia is so separate and seen as this elevated sort of portal of, you know, white ivory towers, that individuals essentially on the ground have been left behind. And that is how anti-intellectualism breeds, essentially, and festers. And it's something that individuals just don't care about. But I suppose that individuals where, or in certain contexts where the church or the Christian church essentially has, specifically speaking, the Calvinist Reformed Church still has a very strong, big stronghold on certain institutions, also dictates the policies and the politics they have. As such, I believe that a lot of individuals look at these perspectives. So I don't believe that a lot of individuals who necessarily describe themselves as theologians, I've, you know, realized, even though I've encountered a lot of individuals who've neglected or, you know, turned their back on academia because of the or the rather limitedness thereof in South Africa, especially in Afrikaans speaking circles.
What are your plans for your academic future?
Well, that remains to be seen.
Wait, yeah, for Dr. Kapp.
Well, I suppose I am working on my podcast, trying to you know, raise funds in order to start my own podcast, because of the fact that as a research associate, I don't get paid. But my passion is research. My passion is being opinionated, and my passion is fighting for that what is right instead of that which is popular. And even if I have to break open a place for diversity and otherness, that is something I am willing to fight for and willing to sacrifice everything I've worked for. Because I believe that there's this brilliant anecdote by, I think it was Martin Niemöller. His first day came. He was a German pastor, Lutheran minister, I think, in the Second World War. First, he was very pro-Nazi, and then he ended up turning and realizing the damage that the Nazis caused. And he created this brilliant poem called Als sie kamen, or First They Came. And essentially the trope is, first they came for the communists, and I was not a communist, and therefore I did not speak out. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I was not a trade unionist, so I did not speak out. And then eventually it comes down to the fact that, and then they came for me, and there was none left to speak for me. And that is something I quite, you know, in my entire identity, I try to enshrine, and also combining it with a sense of public scholarship, by doing essentially what, you know, for example, Dr. Dan McClellan does in the United States, in his public scholarship, in trying to rather do that in a more controversial fashion, but in South Africa, involving more in terms of right-wing politics, and how it connects to religion and anti-intellectualism. These things have been conversations I've grown increasingly interested in. So the intersections of religion in terms of, you know, politics and corruption and all of these things, and also, you know, privilege is something that I try to focus on in trying to also, what do you call it, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. So I suppose that's what I want to do. And me being affiliated with the South African Pagan Rights Alliance has helped a lot in that aspect. So yeah, I suppose having a community that I can be a voice for, individuals whom I can be a voice for, anyone who identifies as different, as contrary to the norm, the queer community, and all of these individuals I want to take with me. And therefore, I'm so excited about your PhD journey and your research scholarship, because of the fact that I need people like you also contributing to research, to fighting towards a more inclusive future, and angering more right-wingers.
I think we're good at that.
Absolutely.
Just one more question. Are you likely to ever trust a reporter from the Rapport again, if they were to
No.
approach you for anything?
No. Hard no. Absolutely not. No. I think they've proven to me that they are not interested in facts. And to be quite fair, I actually owe a few people an apology because I criticized them based on what I read in the report before. So it would teach me to not be so naive to think that there are individuals out there who are really interested, or journalists rather out there, who are really interested in hearing one's story instead of framing it in such a way to cause permanent reputational damage. And it was actually quite sad because of the fact that I had two brilliant gigs coming up that cancel, and the one I was ousted from, both on television, where I was invited to present my status as someone fighting for alternative religion in South Africa, and or alternative religious viewpoints and minority individuals in South Africa. And essentially, I can't remember what the television program was mentioned, or named, but they specifically told me to keep the history of my affiliation with the South African Satanic Church out of it, which I completely agreed. I think that was a messy history that neither of us want to remember. And it was a cult that I think, purposefully was created to anger the white Afrikaner community instead of focusing on a constructive interreligious discourse, representing the other. So, the TV show, actually, the individual who asked me for it actually told me, like, listen, we can't have you on the thing anymore because of the Rapport scandal. And I was like, damn, that was going to be my big break. Finally, a mainstream television network is going to give me the opportunity to tell my story, and the opportunity to portray myself as not being the villain in everybody's story. And so I was ousted from that, and then I was also invited to another program to appear with Ernst Roets, and I just had to cancel that because of the fact that I was not prepared to once again be the Frankenstein in someone else's sensation parade. So I believe that if someone wants to engage me in a conversation in future, it would be someone that I actually can rely on to represent the narratives accurately. Someone such as yourself, for example, and individuals who understand what it means to be marginalized, what understands what it means to fight for your very identity, to be acknowledged as a flippin' human being in South Africa, despite your divergent status as someone different. That whole Shylock narrative of hath a Jew not eyes, warmed by the same fire and cold by the same winter or something. That entire thing, you can sort of use that anecdote as a credo of the other, essentially, by replacing Jew with whatever marginalized community you can think of. It was quite disheartening, but I believe that hopefully, crossing fingers, that some goodness will come out of this shit show, because it was humiliating, it was embarrassing, it was not the type of narrative that I wanted to put outside, and I actually had to reconsider the narrative or the persona I put outwards to the public. And to a certain degree, maybe I bear a modicum of responsibility for the way I was perceived. And that is also something I need to work on.
Oh, okay. Well, Dr. Kapp, thank you very, very much for this interview. And the pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Christina.
So there we have it. My sincere thanks to Tristan for joining me for the interview, and also for you for sticking right through this video. If you have any thoughts, any opinions, please feel free to let myself and Lily over here know by putting them down in the comments under the video. And if you want to like and subscribe, it'll be really appreciated. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.